And we are back on the 0 hour. Joining us on this, what is almost the eve of the great election of 2014, is Roger Hickey. Roger Hickey is co-director of the Campaign for America's Future, where I am a senior fellow, and he is a longtime activist in the world of politics and social change. We're glad to have him on the program again. Roger, thanks for joining us.
Richard, good to be with you on this important occasion. We hope it's important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And, Roger, that's exactly the right word. And that's kind of where I wanted to start with this. Tell us why, we've got a lot of people disaffected out there. That's what I just did a monologue about that, about why this matters. Tell us why this is an important election, because I think we can't hammer that home enough.
Well, it's important on a couple of levels. One is we just hope that we get through it with minimal damage, and the damage could be very great if the bad guys, if the Republicans and the conservatives take over the U.S. Senate, if they continue to dominate many state houses and governorships. That's the sense in which it's worth it to go out and vote. It's important to go out and vote simply to prevent the bad guys from increasing their power over us and making the political situation worse. And who knows? It may be that the Democrats can hold the Senate, but it'll only be because a huge number of Americans turn out, and they turn out in their own self-defense and for a different vision of change for the country. It's frustrating in the sense that, as I'm sure you said in your monologue, this should be a much more inspiring and clear election season. This should be a season where we are debating big things about jobs for all Americans, full employment. We ought to be talking about the future of Social Security and how we can expand it. We ought to have the conservatives on the defensive in terms of how they have undermined a productive economy, how they've destroyed education in many places. This ought to be a big ideas election, and progressives around the country who are frustrated about it need to suck it up and get out there and vote at this last minute period just to prevent the bad guys from taking over. But we've also got a lot of work to do within the Democratic Party to get the Democrats standing for something large and for transforming the country into the country we know it could be. And that's the job for the
Right.
period
And
after this election.
Right. I would say my theme probably for talking about the reasons for voting was vote and then your work begins. You're not done when you vote. That's when you get to work. But Roger, I have never been much of an apologist for the Democratic Party. I hope I've never given you bad headaches because of that. But that said, it doesn't mean let me put it this way. When people say this election doesn't matter, we just got sent around, you and I both received this email on the money that the Koch brothers organizations have given out. $17 million to Tom Tillis, who's running for the U.S. Senate since 2000, $17 million to Joni Ernst, who's running for the U.S. Senate since 2000, $7 million to Cory Gardner, who's challenging Mark Udall for the Senate in Colorado. Obviously, these guys think this election is important.
Yes, and they are putting their money behind some really terrible people, candidates who stand for the tiny portion of the 1% who want to strip mine America just to make things work and get more money for their wealthy clients. It's not only the stealing of this election by the Koch brothers and people like them, but it's the horror is the kind of people who would be in charge of the U.S. Senate if their money buys the election. Uh, and so I have no problem in telling people you got to get out there and vote. You got to get your neighbors and friends to get out there and vote. You got to drive people to the polls because as bad as the economy and the political system may be, it could get a whole lot worse if we let the Koch brothers buy this election and take over the U.S. Senate.
There's another angle of this, and I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it exactly. Okay, we're talking with Roger Hickey, co-director of the Campaign for America's Future, about next week's election. Okay, people, I hear people say, "Well, I'm disappointed in Barack Obama, and so I don't really feel like voting." I mean, you could flip, but a part of me says, number one, okay, I get that. I'm disappointed too, but we've got to get out there. Another part of me says, well, maybe your disappointment is exactly the reason why you should vote. Because if we have a Republican Senate out there, I don't know how the White House will react, but I have this fear that they'll move even further to the right in the spirit of compromise and that we'll get something we really don't want, like those cuts to Social Security that we were able to beat back last year. What do you think
Yeah,
about that?
well, yes, people did have great illusions that Barack Obama was going to change and transform American politics when he first got elected. Many of us have gotten over that illusion pretty quickly. And politics is a battle. It's a battle for what kind of country we want to be, who we want government to stand for. And you're right. If one party, if a conservative party controls the U.S. Senate, then they control a huge part of what determines legislation and the whole the battles to come over the next 2 years. So was I disappointed to be fighting with Barack Obama about his offer to cut Social Security benefits? Yes, I was. But if these guys are in charge, they'll be back to dismantling Social Security. They will be talking about imposing an austerity regime on an economy that could go into another recession if they got their way. They could blockade. What we've seen is the basic budget rules of the United States of America in a way that refuses to raise the debt limit and throws us into another panic and puts millions and millions of people out of work. So there's high stakes in this election, and everybody can find a reason to vote against the Republicans. And the good news is that in many places there's a real movement to support the progressive candidates who are putting up a good fight and campaigning as populists. I would point to Georgia Senate race where economic issues are front and center. I'd point to North Carolina where we're trying to keep Tom Tillis, the guy who took over the legislature and imposed all kinds of bad policies. From education cuts to blocking voting rights in North Carolina. We've got the governor's race in Wisconsin. There's a whole lot of places where the Democrat candidate represents, for better or for worse, a progressive movement for change.
And you know what's interesting about that? We're talking with Roger Hickey of the Campaign for America's Future. What's interesting about that to me is Elizabeth Warren's role in this campaign. An awful lot of Senate candidates have called on Senator Warren and asked her to come and speak for them, including Allison Grimes in Kentucky. Now, Kentucky is, in no one's imagination, a liberal state like Massachusetts, but you've got, Elizabeth Warren. Number one, she's from Oklahoma and can talk to people in a way that connects. But number two, she's very clearly the economic populist candidate or figure in the Democratic Party of note, the one most well known. So it's interesting that while we may lament the fact that Democrats aren't, as a party or as a whole, running on big issues, they're certainly calling out the populist hero when they can. I think by last count, she had appeared or spoken in at least 17 different campaigns, most notably Kentucky, West Virginia, and I'm blanking on the third, but she's been out there as a voice. And we could argue that supporting these Democratic candidates is part of what I worry about is the messaging that comes through the media. Should the Republicans capture the Senate, you and I might know it was a referendum on a lousy economy and they rejected the party they saw as in power. But I'm afraid the media will take it as a rejection of economic populism and a sharp tack to the right by the country because they always get this stuff wrong. But you have more experience tracking media response than I do. Do you think that's a reasonable concern?
No doubt that if the Republicans win, they are going to get a huge praise from the media the story will be that the country has turned to the right. The great thing about Elizabeth Warren is that we have a situation where the economy is not producing for average working people after this long period of struggling to recover. Elizabeth has an explanation that she takes to people who are casting around for why it is that it's so hard for us to just keep a roof over our heads and keep the kids fed and at school. Her simple explanation is that the portion of the 1% have rigged the system in their favor and against you. And for people who are frustrated and looking for somebody to blame, it's very, very important that Elizabeth is out there saying that explicitly. It's rigged against you. It's not your fault. And the only way to solve this thing, to make it work for average working people, is for us to get together and break the power of the very, very wealthy and over our economic destiny. So she gives people not only a reason why they're feeling frustrated, but directs them in the right direction in terms of who's their friends and who's their enemy. And that kind of populism is what the Democratic Party has got to rebuild itself around in the coming years. But it's really is impressive that candidates of all stripes have understood that she is popular because of that, and they've invited her even to states like West Virginia, where the Democrats are having a hard time.
Well, and let's hope that we're able to say she saved a few races come Tuesday. And I think it's a great point. People know their lives aren't good. The Republicans have convinced a lot of them that somehow government is at fault, which is nonsense. So we've got a counter narrative that works. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the election with Roger Hickey, co-director of the Campaign for America's Future, when we come back from these breaks. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour. And we are back on the Zero Hour. We are talking with Roger Hickey, co-director of the Campaign for America's Future, about the imminent election. And you know, Roger, one of the things that groups like Campaign for America's Future does or do, I can't parse that sentence right now, that I think is of great value is it both to conduct polls and to synthesize the results of other polls. We have that site populistmajority.org that goes through and looks at issue, but rather than am I a Republican, am I a Democrat, am I a liberal, or am I conservative, which party has my approval this month or whatever, or do I, which is a very low number often, but it really looks at how people look at the issues. And one of the striking things when we talk about why it's important to vote and then get active or continue to be active is, I think if you look at something like populistmajority.org, it's pretty clear that whatever people call themselves, at least when it comes to economic policy, we live in a pretty progressive country.
Yeah, it's really striking when you ask people what they think. The vast majority of Americans want big change. They know the current system, especially the economic system, is not working for them. Um, and that's why I would love that I would hope that our work in the next period gets the Democratic Party more aligned with the majority, the populist majority out there who want to see big change. There's been a battle over should we cut Social Security and how much, and whether the Obama administration will make a deal to cut Social Security. Well, you ask the public about Social Security, and it doesn't matter whether they're Tea Party or whether they're just average middle class Americans. People not only support Social Security, but if you ask them, should we expand it? They say yes, indeed, we should be expanding it. People strongly support public investment, the government investing in jobs and growth and infrastructure and new industries across the board. I mean, this is the way you get the legendary white guys on board. Is they know that the economy is not producing good jobs, and across lots of income groups and a lot of things that normally divide people. People are in favor of a strategy to create jobs, to invest in education, to get this economy going again. So this election is frustrating because only in a few places and only on specific issues have some of those big changes been engaged by the politicians. But underneath it all, people are looking for leaders who are worth casting their vote for, and who they think will fight against the well entrenched interests who are dominating the financial system and controlling politics, and who will also get the government on the side of prosperity for all of us.
Yeah, I think that's really well said, and it's a great point, and it's what we should be thinking of. And I guess my last question is just kind of a broad one, and maybe not a fair one, in which case you'll be mad at me, but I think it's okay. Which is, what fires you up, if anything, about this election? Everybody seems so dispirited nowadays, and it is kind of hard sometimes to generate fierce enthusiasm for a complex set of issues like this. Is there anything about this race that gets you excited?
Well, I've spent some time in North Carolina, and what has happened down there with the right wingers and the Koch brothers taking over the legislature and taking North Carolina in a hard right wing direction, and draconian cuts to education, and refusal to take Medicaid, and undermining environmental protections, and making it much harder for people to vote. That was a pure right wing play where they won the legislature. Tom Tillis, the candidate for U.S. Senate now, was the head of the right-wing legislature, and in response, the Moral Mondays movement grew to protest almost every week, nonviolent protests all over the state of North Carolina, and you had two visions of what that state and what our country ought to be about. And it will really be exciting if Tom Tillis, one of the architects of all this right-wing nonsense, gets defeated. And it'll be due to a massive mobilization led by Reverend Barber of the NAACP, but a really diverse coalition of people in a southern state who, as Reverend Barber said, are working for a third reconstruction of North Carolina and the South, one that's both white and black, and pretty powerful working class coalition. So It's those kind of victories. If we can pull them off, uh, Wisconsin is another case where the governor just needs to
Right.
go.
Right. Right.
Uh,
Absolutely. Yeah.
uh, those kind of victories will really resonate around the country, and it'll give courage to everybody who's trying to make change in every state in the union. And it'll also teach the Democratic Party that's the way you got to go. You got to
Absolutely.
really.
Well, yeah, I think those are great races, great examples. Any last thoughts on where people might go to chip in, either in these last few days, either with money or phone banking? I mean, I
I'm
know they can.
sure everybody listening to this radio program has been getting emails from really good organizations who are doing turnout, who are doing telephone calls into the states. Just pick your favorite organization and give money, give your time, get out there and take people to the polls, and then let's keep fighting for a real populist agenda within the political system after this election is over.
That works for me. Roger Hickey, co-director of the Campaign for America's Future. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, RJ.
You bet. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and we'll be back after this with a look at why people need to get to vote, get out there and vote. The people who vote are more progressive. Excuse me, the people who don't vote are more progressive, and we got to do something to get them out there and vote. I'm Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero.